I want to talk DC NextGen. It's gone through a bunch of iterations, but in short, it's DEF CON for kids.
DC NextGen is awesome. So when Dark Tangent made the decision that he really wanted to incorporate the next generation of hackers, he said, let's actually do this for real. So the first thing to understand is DC NextGen is owned by DEF CON. So it's not a separate village or community, but it's actually owned. And so we're involved in a lot of the decision making for what's going to happen at DEF CON. As soon as the theme comes out, we have discussions with Dark Tangent to make sure that what we would like to do at the youth level matches up with what the conference is trying to achieve. And I can give you an example of that when we talk about the CTF badge we did this year. The second thing is Bia Silap, rock star, is 18. She started DC NextGen at 17. Wow. So you now have somebody heading up DC NextGen who totally gets the whole focus of where the next-gen content should be. I mean, I think she did her first talk at DEF CON on a main stage at 13.
That's nuts.
It was, I want to say it was on voter security, because that's another passion of hers. But anyway, you know.
I think, or was that one on the bus pass one? I remember there was a talk.
I think 2 or 3 talks at DEF CON.
That's awesome. That is
dating
incredible.
Back. Anyway, her passion for this, she also runs a public charity, Girls Who Hack, and she does workshops all over the place. She wanted to not have DC NextGen be sort of a little isolated pocket. And so her vision and what we're able to now do is really cool. DC NextGen creates content that we deliver. The vast majority of what ends up happening with DC NextGen is working with the villages and the communities and the contests for them to sign up to do youth-appropriate content. And so this year we took that to a whole new level by creating a CTF that actually incorporates all the villages. So the DC NextGen youth are going to be coming down into the villages and going to aerospace and learning about hacking I2C and going to AppSec and these different groups, and they're going to either catch a workshop, or they're going to do a demo, or they're going to do some hands-on exercises to earn a flag.
Oh, that's cool. And all their presentations, so when they go around to all their villages, are specifically for you.
Each of these villages has said, we have content that we would love to deliver for the youth segment of DEF CON hackers. And so sometimes it's, an intro piece. In many cases, it's stuff they already do with other, DEF CON attendees, but they realize that, okay, if they break this piece off and make it a single flag or a single, demo, it really fits well with the whole mission that BSI Lab has created for DC NextGen.
That's so cool.
So this year we took a couple of things to heart, and one was, okay, last year was really the first full formal year for DC NextGen, and we had a lot of stuff going on in the villages, but it was kind of passive from the standpoint of what we were organizing. The villages had signed up for it, and the villages were going to do it. This year we said, okay, now we want to incent them to do that. And so we said, let's create a massive capture the flag. And so we created what is called the IR-CTF wristband, which is what we have here. It is a fully self-contained IR transceiver CTF flag send and receive unit.
That is cool.
And there's tiers to the scoring. So the first tier is you want to score as a NextGen attendee all the flags of the other NextGen attendees. And we randomly assigned 12 different creatures as identities. So there's 12 different DC NextGen identities every attendee is trying to capture. So, okay, they get one.
So how do you capture one then?
Okay, so what will happen is there's 2 buttons on this. There's an IR send and an IR receive. They can wake it up, and when they wake it up, it shows them their identity and which other identities they've collected. They press it again, and it will transmit their identity to somebody else. Now, the other button shows them their score overall, and if they press it again, it receives identities. So all they're going to do is they're going to walk up and, exchange, I'm interested in this. I'm like, okay, can I exchange identities with you? One will send, the other will receive, and then they'll switch back and forth. And while you're receiving, if you receive a successful flag, for a short period of time, your badge shows the other person's identity.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's 12 DC NextGen randomly assigned identities. There's 10 staff, and they all have their own identities. There's 10 villages, there's 1 special badge, and there's 1 Uber secret badge, bonus badge. The villages all share a tune. So when you score a village flag, their attendee badge, it will show which village they just scored out of the sequence, but it'll also play the village tune, which happens to be YMCA.
Oh gosh.
By the village people.
So we got so far ahead.
Yeah.
I want to actually
Okay, let's back you.
because I have 2 kids, and both of them have been asking me every year, like, can I go to DEF CON? They're way too young to come to DEF CON. Also, I like what I do at DEF CON, and then so here's the question: at what point should kids? I didn't say should, but like, what point would you would say kids should get involved, and parents should get involved with the kids?
That's a great question. I'm really glad you put it together, because the first question is do the parents want to have the kids involved? You know, there are some parents like, I want to introduce my kids to everything, not just hacking, not just DEF CON. And that's great. Mm-hmm. And there are those, the kids have already started to show, the youth have already started to show interest in kind of some of those things. And typically 11 and on, they start to show the aptitude. Okay, they're comfortable on a computer, right? You know, they can type commands in and they can understand how to work with a computer. And that's sufficient for a lot of the work. The other one is, do they have the level of curiosity? Mm-hmm. And to a little bit, and this is where the adults come in, you need to understand their attention span so you don't overwhelm them. Because even we know that once we get overwhelmed, we kind of start to shut down and we just don't want to engage. And there's so much going on with the villages and the communities in space that you need to balance that. And the parents and guardians are the ones that really know when that, occurs. Typically, though, you'd say sort of 11 to 17 is the range. We see a lot of sweet spot in the 13 to 15. This year, we're seeing some of the younger ones that are like really excited. You also see them that they're kind of quiet, but they're asking the right questions. And those are all signs that, okay, it's time to give it a try.
Is there things that you would have like, I know this is a little separate from NextGen, but like, are there things you would have kids do prior to coming to NextGen to almost prepare them for it?
So again, we come back to, do they have basic computer skills? It's a good one. And then it's, what are they curious about? If they're curious about anything that's going to overlap with any of the areas, are they curious about, how a lock works? Or are they curious about a web page and what makes it up? Well, the minute you're curious about what makes up a web page, all of a sudden you get into, okay, I want to look at F12. I want to look at the source code. And then they start getting curious about, oh, so this is how an application works. Mm-hmm. And then you can start talking to them about why that can be risky. Another thing that isn't necessarily what we focus on with DC NextGen, but is important in the same age group, is know how to protect yourself, both online and physically. And so the parents are the ones that are going to know where that level is. And then, as we all know, you try it. If they don't like it, you're going to know.
Yeah, and the other piece of this too is like, usually there's always a gateway to the other things. I use like 3D printing. 3D printing goes from, okay, I want to make a fun little toy, to now I want to design my own toys, to now I want to design a product, or I want to design a challenge. Yeah. And now that I've learned how to program that, well, if I want it to do something outside this little gadget, I now need to like write a server and have it interact with that. So I'd see how almost all these different areas start branching out to a bunch of the different aspects.
Yeah. And a lot of what you just touched on is why I personally, and it's not something focused specifically on DC NextGen, but why personally I gravitate towards CircuitPython, because you can do almost anything with CircuitPython, but there's a lot of those building blocks already available to you. So if you're interested in IoT, I want to communicate with something else, or I want to affect something else by sending it a message. That's really easy to do in CircuitPython because you've got those. So if a youth starts to show curiosity about, well, how can I turn on a light switch from a computer program? Okay, now you can kind of explore that whole thing. And then once you come to DEF CON, that's the IoT space. That's, you know, and so for me, I always say CircuitPython is sort of a gateway drug.
Yeah. Like let's say now,
Yeah.
I have kids. I want to get them involved. They're older now. They've shown curiosity. Like, do I have to register? Do I just show up with the kids? How do I get involved with DC NextGen?
Awesome. So DEF CON itself, at a certain age, they need to have their own badge. Specific to DC NextGen, there's no pre-registration. You can just show up. The first time they show up, adult with them, and if they're of a certain age or above, then we will get verbal agreement from both the adult and the youth that it's okay for the youth to show up without the adult after that point. But initially, they both come together. We just did our kickoff, and in that they got their swag bag and all their content. They learned about the CTF that we're doing, and they got a full rundown of all the activities. Well, the parents and guardians got the same information. So now they can kind of say, okay, you know, let's now go off to aerospace. Let's go off to AppSec. Let's go off to Blacks in Cyber, you know, these different groups. And they can kind of guide them through based on their own personal experiences.
As a question, this is like sort of an odd question. For the parent and guardian who said, "Hey, I'm gonna drop you off. They're of an age. We have an agreement and all of that." Is there a check-in? Like, is NextGen kind of walled off, or is it like is there? I want to say, like, is the kid able to leave, or is there like a check-in thing?
There's a term we use, and it may or may not be. Yeah, we're not daycare.
Yep.
So yes. If let's say, for instance, there's a 15-year-old youth, the adult comes in, they go through the intro, and the parent says, "I'm perfectly comfortable with my son, daughter staying here and working on the challenges." We'll say, "Do you have a way to communicate to each other?" Mm-hmm. "Yes, we do. We have cell phones." "Okay." Then they are responsible to communicate with you when they come and go. We're not going to say you have to stay here until an adult or a parent come back. They can come and go as they please.
So they totally answers the question. Yeah. It's funny, as you said, it went through iterations where at one point it was almost, I'd say treated as a daycare, but it was kind of like kids go hang out, adults can go. Yeah. This one is really meant to adult, kid, let's go learn something together. Let's go explore conference. And then they gain some comfort around DEF CON, where when they get older and they probably experience it, now it's like, hey, I want to experience, we'll call it my DEF CON, my DC NextGen, and I want to go off and do these things. And then we'll meet up and go on some of these adventures together.
BSI Lab has had this great vision for DC NextGen that, you know, we're not a con within a con. What we are is we are a gateway to all the skills and capabilities that DEF CON has to offer. We'll let you experience all of them, and then you decide what are the ones you're most interested in. What do you want to go and do a deep dive in? Where do you want to like develop out your skills? And that's really the whole goal is we're going to expose as much as we possibly can to all the cool stuff out there. Then over time, you figure out what is really, you know, the hot item for you. You know, is it car hacking? Is it red team? Is it blue team? Is it reverse engineering? Web exploits and all those different things. But until you've actually kind of like done a CTF or done a little demo or done a flag, you kind of don't know where you sit in that group. And so that's the goal, is expose them to everything, really introduce all the opportunities that the hacking community has. You know, BSI Lab has actually just recently done a few, you know, short videos saying that addressing the real issue, which is if you go to a layperson and say, hacker conference, they're going to go, "Oh God, you guys are like trying to destroy everything." It's like, there are always going to be unethical hackers, but the vast majority of hacking is ethical and it's good for society.
Well, and it teaches I feel like so many of like the core principles you're teaching are not just like, oh, these will help you in your career, these will help you in InfoSec. These will help you in life to navigate difficult situations, to come across a problem you've never seen before and breaking up that problem into this is how I solve this. And like, I have a car issue. It's not like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? But like, okay, is this something I can solve myself? Do I have to pull in another expert? Like, they're just fundamental communicate. Even like when you have a passion for this project, how do I get other people to rally around this project and I give them more interest in it? Like, these are fundamental principles, which aren't even just, they're hacker principles, that help with life, as goofy as that sounds.
And I love that because, I mean, yes, I'm a relic, but I even remember when I had, the idiot light on my truck went off, right? It's like, well, okay, I'd like to know more about that before I go and just simply hand it off to some mechanic. And so I learned about the little module you can plug into a car, and you can get the codes, and you can go online and you can look at that stuff. It's the way you start to explore stuff. You have a problem, you got to solve it.
Well, and I would even argue, like at kids' age, like, we almost it's so funny. Like, as we've grow up, when we're a kid, we have no fear. I plug in a computer directly into the car because I don't think about, like, what happens if I break the car? What happens if I do this? I am curious about this thing. I just plug in. And somewhere along the lines, we lose that. We almost gain on this mantle of responsibility where it's like, I'm too busy. I have too many other priorities, or I'm too worried about breaking these things I don't know nothing about. Well, if you introduce kids, this is why I wanted to talk to you about NextGen, is when you introduce kids to it, they keep that childlike curiosity throughout, which makes it so I can just plug into the car. I can almost like this phrase of like, oh, I can figure this out, because there's no evidence to the contrary that I won't figure it out because I've had all these other experiences.
My personal favorite one is, how difficult can it be? And you go in with that attitude, and it's like, oh, you hit a roadblock. Well, you figure out how to solve that roadblock. And the youth are just so open to just sort of, okay, well, and they'll go, instead of trying to solve the problem in front of them, they'll sort of go around it. It's like, that's an awesome solution. Just go around the problem, work on the next one. And so, yes, we try to feed the curiosity. What's the old story about, I've got, two wolves.
I don't think I know that was one.
Oh, there's one about two wolves, and whichever one you feed is the one that's going to grow. So if you feed the one that's pessimistic or evil or dark, then that's evil and dark is going to grow. But if you feed the one that's curious and open and inspiring and trying to solve new problems, they're going to grow in that space. And so, yeah, the goal is feed the curious wolf.
Mm-hmm. So I know you need to get to a talk.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for me? I have kids. What advice would you have for me about NextGen? I mean, we talked about it going specifically if you're a parent with young kids. We've talked about getting involved. Is there something you would tell me as just even a parting thought?
What I would say is, if you already go to DEF CON as an adult, grab from online the agenda for DC NextGen, look through it, and sit down with the youth in your lives and say, they covered these things. Also, the DCNextGen.org website has a lot, like when we do workshops, I'm doing 2 workshops this year. Once the conference is over, all the workshop content gets published out there. Last year, the badge and all the related workshops to the badge are out there. Last year's badge was CircuitPython based. So there's all this example out there. And so it gives you tools for having that conversation. And if they kind of just don't catch on to any of it, that's cool. But if all of a sudden they start asking you questions about, well, hold it, they did something with AppSec, or they did something with IoT, or they did something with Currency Village. One of the cool ones that just blew my mind last year was the amount of interest in data duplication. Well, as an adult, I think of data duplication as just copying stuff around. No, they tore hard drives apart. They dug into how a hard drive actually worked and why it fails. And then they got into the next level of, okay, well, how do they do data redundancy? And how do they, and it turned into just like this huge blast for DC NextGen. Oh, and, they've done a whole bunch more this year.
That's cool.
And so finding out of all the different things that get talked about in a current DEF CON, if they ask questions about something, that's your gateway to sort of then go the next level. And so, yeah, as a parent or a guardian of somebody who might be DC NextGen youth age range, show them what you saw. And if there's a spark there, that's the one you keep feeding.
Yeah. Well, hey, Relic, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. And as always,
Silk, appreciate it. Always fun.
Yeah, it is always. Hack on.
Hack on.